In this video, we are going to continue to explore, but with extra detail, the amazing transformations that are brought by the ABR Fascia Gel in the mimics, articulation, and the facial expressions. But at the same time, we are going to look at the two contexts. One context is going to be deeper, so like why is it happening? And the other context is going to be broader. So where else we are able to apply the same benefits and what other areas are going to be positively influenced by the same type of the application. And there's of course a third dimension because this kid is in a, let's say, moderate state. And for the children or for the parents of the children in a more severe condition, there's always a question like, oh, wow, I see such a spectacular result in this child who is more moderate, but my child is more severe. And for me, I don't really see the effects so clearly. Like, does it mean that it doesn't work for me, or like, what shall I see? And all these other dimensions. So these are the three main dimensions which we're going to discuss. So first point that I want to bring into your attention is this. See here, discussing this remarkable improvement of the facial articulations. What I'm showing here, I'm showing the sequences, not just the final arrivals, not just the final points where this child face is, when he's trying to do a certain function. But we are also looking at the total sequence of activation and the related elements. And what you're seeing here very clearly, what's the key difference? You see, my frames here are positioned about 1/4 of a second apart. So when I do 1, 2, 3, 4, that means it's about 1 second that has passed. And now I do 5, 6, 7, 8, so that's 2 seconds. So, and over here, in this scenario, I do 1, and you can see also right away there is the over-synchronized and indivisible forced movement of the forehead that happens. I do 2, you see the eyes closed, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's what happened in the same 8 clicks before. See how many movements which are actually involuntary movements and which are lumped together when this control that we are really looking for the independent control of the eyes versus the independent control of the eyes versus the independent control of the mouth, and that is shown so clearly on this picture. So on opposite, for this kid, we see how many involuntary engagements are there. And now I hope that this is going to click the first resonance for you. That what is happening in the other areas? What are the key challenges for your child? Whether it's the hands, whether it's the arms, whether it's the torso, whether it's the legs, hips, and so on, it's a lack of this selective control. So therefore, the lessons that we're drawing from the face are applicable everywhere else. And particularly the study of the sequences, because what you're having here is that you see, we can see the micro movements. So the intent from this boy is exactly the same, 1 year before and now. But what you see here, these micro movements, if before there was just kind of this combined fusions, and now we are seeing the micro movements, even these micro shuffles of his nostrils. So these are amazing controls that are becoming possible. And of course, you're also seeing that as his mouth control and the face control has improved, right? So you see that gives him a much more selective control of the head movement. So I hope that this is where you can see this link and where it's taking us. But now let's go back to the deeper understanding and get the better idea of what are the key mechanisms behind the way how the fascia gel works. So on the one hand, we have this well written document which I shared a few years ago, which describes in detail all the key things, and that's a basic slogan where the bioactive proteins facilitating the recovery of the liquid and the fibrous fascia, helping the mobility and stability of the muscles, ligaments, and joint capsules. So that's a 10-page document that all of you are having the link to, and the link is going to be sent to you specifically. And the key idea from this document actually comes in a several relatively simple punches. So step one, the discovery and the realization of the importance of the extracellular matrix and the fascia. So, this might sound theoretical, but this picture that we keep bringing to your attention is actually the one that really should nail it. It's like, okay, here we are. We used to think it was only about the muscles, but now the full realization tells us that the muscles as such, which are the ones which could be under trouble with the central nervous control, they are the subsets of the much bigger system, which is the system of the fascial layers or the entire, in fact, fascia matrix. So therefore, our number one goal is to address this matrix. So, and this is where the bioactive proteins allow us to address this primary level of impact onto the muscle that comes from the level of the skin and from the level of the mechanical fat. In order to help ourselves to understand how does that work, so this is how the fascia looks up and close. And this is a transition to the computer animations, which actually made possible our understanding of how the kind of internal 3D build of the fascia works. And this is how we gradually get into the zoom, and you can see the relationship between the fascia. And so this is the understanding that is actually absolutely critical. So it comes from the videos of Jean-Claude Coubertin and his, pioneering explorations of the human tissues, which was happening in vivo. So like when just with on not on the cadavers, but actually on living people with the use of the high resolution, so video camera. And that's what we can discover, that in order to control the muscle, how it contracts in the dynamic fashion, you need to plug it and peg it into the stable connection to the skin. So that's actually what we are dealing with. Now, once we understand that there are sequences of the connections and that you need the particular control from the level of the skin, the stability of the skin to have the freedoms of the muscles, now we can realize why the face provides us with such a great example. Because when we look at the face, we see this typical picture, but then as we go further, we actually come to this key understanding, and is like what you can read here. So that the face muscles are among the most interesting muscles of the entire body because they are pretty unusual. So they originate on the bone, but they insert on the skin. So what does it mean? That means that all the regular muscles, they originate on the bone and then connect on the bone. So two of this type of very, very stiff boundaries, whilst the muscles of the face, so they originate on the bone, but they connect onto the skin. So that's why they're work with the skin factor is particularly demonstrative when it comes to the face. So that's why it's much easier to see the facial transformations than the transformations happening anywhere else. So that's actually the key answer. But then within it, of course, we see a number of the other things, like how those facial connections are related to movements and the to precisions which are available through it. And then, obviously, this particular class of the face muscles is still the same in its bigger kind of composition as the rest of the body. And then we have three big lessons to take, which I want you to be very, very aware of. So what are the key demonstrations that we are giving you with the fascia gel applications? So first point, what we are doing, we are often using the example of the kids, even in the more severe condition, who has scars, right? Because scars, if you want to have a proof for yourself that, oh, okay, those gel applications are really working, and then this designated and declared transformation activating the fibroblasts which are responsible for the remodeling of the different types of skins and embedded muscles. So if this capacity is really to take place, we have the greatest challenge to work with. And that greatest challenge to work with is, of course, the scar. So the scar itself is something which is fused and fixed. So therefore, if we want to test how motivated fibroblasts are as a result of the gel, we have to check the scars. And now this kid is, for example, had the scar which was associated with which was a result of his surgery done, when he was just born. And now he's like 5 years old. So what you're having here, the scar is moving. The scar is also moving alongside, and the scar, as you can see, slides back and forth. Some parents say, like, what's the big deal? Like, what does it prove? Well, the answer is actually very, very obvious. It proves a lot because the scars, they are supposed to go through the entire set of layers. So there is no such thing as just the cut, the surgery, the open heart surgery that this kid needed. There's no such thing as cutting through just one layer. The cut is being done through all the layers, all the way through the bone. And the healing, the standard spontaneous healing happens throughout the entire thing, and it becomes a very fused thing. So therefore, the regular scar, the scar which hasn't been worked at or hasn't been applied the ABR fascia gel, that's a scar which is fused. And very often that's a big restriction to the child's growth because the scar, when the rest is growing, the scar is not. So this is a huge factor that we can generally indicate and saying, if the scar is changing, well, other types of skin less dramatically affected, less dramatically super glued than the scar, they should be easier to deal with. But then comes another question like, okay, but my child doesn't have any scars. So what's the benefit for me? And here, as we complete this demo, because this is actually the most obvious one, right? So you can see that the scar is one line, and then the original scar on the bone is separate. So that shows that yes, the effects are there. But this brings us to this key point. In fact, what do we want? What is the big outcome that we are looking at? And the answer is very simple. We want the super competent skin. And the super competent skin we can know whether it's super competent internally by their reflection of what's happening externally. You see, these micro dots that you are seeing here, they are the indicators of the true skin capacity to have the maximum distribution of loads and to control the underlying muscles. So in other words, if your child's skin has this super dots, the micro dots, then you're guaranteed to have a quality controls. With this kind of skin, you're guaranteed that your child is going to be able to sit, your child is going to be able to move and is going to do a lot of, competent things. So that's the key. So this is what you should look and say, this is what I want from my child's skin at the micro level. And the closer I am to this, the better the whole situation. The second thing that you're looking there is that from that superstructure, the super microstructure, you want the next level. So that under the loads, the skin would be organized in those controllable creases, which in this case on the back really correspond to the division between the vertebrae. And that's the second question that you need to ask about your child. Do I have this right sequence? The super dots, which are then followed by the micro creases. And then it has to be present in different dimensions, because this is also indicating the capacity of the skin to give the angular adjustments, and those angular adjustments, they are critical for the control of everything, all the muscles which are embedded into the skin. And then once you have those along and across, there comes another big thing. So this is the map. So this is what you need to see. If you are looking, for example, at the divisions at the buttocks, if you see these divisions where the sacrum is divided from the buttocks as such, if you see those skin divisions which represent everything we're talking about, the micro creases and the actual super dots, then you could be sure that this child is controlling the legs. If you want the opposite examples, here they are. So this is the skin which doesn't have competence. So, it's not difficult to compare this and this. There are no micro dots. If there are no micro dots, there is no internal competence. And if there is no internal competence, the skin either slides or fuses. And then the muscles either fuse or and go into the hypertone, or they can actually be completely switched off and go into the hypotone. Because in other words, if you look on the big picture, the skin provides the brakes and the muscles provide the gas pedal. So in fact, if the brakes are not working, the body will not have the ability to utilize the gas pedal properly. And then if this example looks too extreme, too smooth, too undivided, see, under the same loads, nothing is happening there. So, and then we have also, instead of the high quality micro creases, so we don't have enough of those micro dots. Then there are other examples. You see, I was showing you before what we want to see. So that's high quality. This is the skin which doesn't have the quality. And you see here, as I do the same loads, what's happening? You are not seeing the corresponding divisions which would indicate the attachments to the bone and the transition through the layers of fascia. So that is actually a very, very simple and basic thing to understand that I'm bringing your attention to. So, in other words, what we want a child to be shifted. What is the goal of our work? What is the big, facilitating help that we can provide to the child to move from here, from those lack of divisions into those possible divisions, into the segmentations. And the segmentations start with the skin. So with the skin that has to have the creases, but before the creases, it should have even this level of the micro dots. So you see, this is the example of how the things are starting to improve, because this child is starting to show some creases, but so far these creases do not yet have the micro dots. This is a huge difference. Micro dots is the deepest level. The creases should come on top. And this is the key line for the children with in the severe conditions. Guys, you are missing that basic superstructure. Your child doesn't have those micro dots. So therefore, what you want to facilitate as much as possible to bring whatever you can, not just to have those first micro creases, but then get the next level when the micro creases are going to have the micro super dots in it. So that's really a very basic thing to understand. And of course, the specific part about the face, that the face doesn't have those super micro dots. The face is exactly what we were talking just earlier. The face is special. The face is special because it has one attachment to the skin and one attachment to the bone. But in the scenarios when you need to deal with the more specific, more classic, typical muscles, then you need to have both. You need to have, the skin is going to have this the good quality skin enabling the control of the muscles and all the good things that come with it. This is the key. This is the key. So in other words, if you want the harvest, but your soil is actually too poor, so ABR Fascia Gel is a natural, simple offer. Guys, you need those particular super dots, and those super dots, they are the ones which would be the reflections of the proper inner structure of the extracellular matrix. You don't need to overthink it. You don't need to know even too much about the extracellular matrix and all this kind of mysterious substance and so on. In fact, it's a very simple thing. If you don't have the super dots, well, your internal structure is not doing well. If you have the super dots, and then on top of the super dots you've got the super creases, which are providing you with the angular adjustments, then you're doing well. Now, what shall we do in this scenario? The answer would be get the fertilizer, right? So you see, if your soil is not doing particularly well, so if it's not fertile enough, so you need to do what? You need to put fertilizer. And there is nothing simpler than putting the fertilizer, which is the ABR Fascia Gel. Apply the thin layer twice a day in the areas which need the fertilization most, and gradually things are going to get better. So your mechanical loads are going to get more effective, and so on and so on. So this is part of our fertilization strategy. And why is it working? Well, because that particular bioactive proteins that were extracted from the leech salivary glands, they are designed to facilitate the ungluing within the liquid forms of fascia. And this is a great example which I'm also bringing to your attention, which is showing you that if we are to get the particular zoom, we are able to see that overall, there is a very obvious improvement, for those cases when there was nothing but the fascia gel applications. You can see that as the skin connections improve, so the muscular representation changes dramatically as well. The new folds appear, the new folds provide the capacity for the movement. So that is very, very simple and very, very basic. So I hope that this video serves both, or this series of videos serves both the inspirational and the instructional purposes for the parents of the children in various conditions. So we discussed this as 5 classes of challenges that could be addressed via the face mimic improvements, emotional, vision and sensory, movements, control, voice and vocalizations, and of course eating and swallowing. But then, this video in particular is designed to show you that in fact there is more, right? So you see that what you're really looking for, you're looking for that development of the superstructures, the super microstructures within the skin. And if you don't have them, your child is not really expected to do any kind of good positions or good movements. Simple as that. Because without the multiple relationships, when there are thousands of microfibers controlling the singular of the fascia, controlling the singular fascia of the muscle, fibers of the muscles, of course there is no possibility of the control. You need the much better brakes in order to be able to control the gas. That's a simple logic. So I hope that this logic helps, that this explanation helps, and we'll say thank you very much for this very enthusiastic young man with very telling facial expressions, which are now becoming much richer, becoming now much more specific, and you really see how he's really exploring the world and enjoying this newly discovered capacities and competences. So thank you very much for your attention, and you can get the link which explains the 10-page document that explains you the sequence of the key ideas behind the ABR Fascia Gel in the link which is going to be provided somewhere near this video. Cheers!